All right, what's going on, everybody? Let me know if you can hear everything. We're just gonna kind of get kicked off here. We're about 16 minutes to launch. Here to hang out, talk about Rocket Lab, explain Rocket Lab for those of you guys that don't know anything about it. Currently, they're explaining what the Tropics mission is that NASA is kind of launching. This shit gets me fired up, bro. Yeah, is there no audio? Let me know. I thought I put audio on. Okay, very good. Yeah, that was about 2.5 weeks ago. The launch that we're gonna be launch or the launch we're gonna be watching today, the 37th launch, is, was supposed to take place a couple days ago, but what I didn't share is actually pretty interesting. This is the anniversary of 6 years ago where they launched this particular rocket for the first time, so it's pretty interesting that 6 years later, here we are working with NASA. That's one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on the company, right? I mean, you have some of these other people in the space that we could talk about a little bit more. There's so many other people in the space that are just getting their first rocket off or have yet to get their rocket off or they're trying new things. And it's aspirational, right? I mean, it's super cool that all these folks are really trying to help out people like NASA, right? The reason why we're seeing what we're seeing today is the partnerships with NASA and what we're going to be seeing today in terms of um, this particular. Let's see. If I mute that, can you guys not hear it anymore? I think that's probably right. But yeah, like the whole reason why we're seeing this today is because the partnerships with NASA, right? And the things that are kind of getting kicked off. And it's like just mind boggling how at this point, you're starting to see the consolidation of multitude of different launch partners and stuff of the like really starting to kind of come down. And one of the things that I wanted to share, my boy Cole over here sent me the note basically with Virgin Orbit kind of going under, they actually just bought some of the facilities in Long Beach, California, associated with it. Um, so it's it's definitely really cool. Like I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, Rocket Lab speculative." It's like, yeah, they have about $450 million at this point in runway, and they just spent $16 million acquiring some of that Long Beach real estate and probably equipment from Virgin Orbit when their bankruptcy court kind of went through. And I'm really curious, like if you think about it, the kind of guidance they've given is they're trying to create a medium launch size vehicle. So they have this small size launch vehicle, which is done relatively well. They have a bunch of space systems. They have really good solar systems that they're really starting to get picked up off the ground. And they're running through some of the old contracts. And once those newer contracts kind of come in, the margins are going to increase, hopefully. But that medium launch vehicle is going to take about 200 million. Now that deal that they just did with buying that Long Beach, California facility is hopefully going to get the cost down to that a little bit. So I'm curious in the Q2, which I guess we have about a month left to go, and they'll probably have something in like the August timeframe for Rocket Lab. I'm curious in the August timeframe what update they'll give us about what costs will be for the Neutron gun going forward. Because if that is, be able to save 100 million or even 50 million, for instance, Rocket Lab's kind of going at a pretty good pace, right? So I think with that additional 250 million that they kind of have on the books, they're burning about 20 million every single quarter in terms of run rate. So that gives them about another 2.5 years. So it's about the time when they'd be actually get that medium launch vehicle kind of up and running. And it's just astonishing. And a lot of people also talk about, the competition between this particular company and SpaceX, and it's different, right? I mean, SpaceX, you have to think, is interplanetary, right? They're more so focusing on. Hold on, let's see what they're saying. Am I muted, or are you talking about the actual video is muted?
Altitude. This is where the mission departs from our standard format. Typically, Electron's second stage takes the kick stages and payloads to an elliptical orbit, and we use the small 3D printed Curie engine on the kick stage to circularize the orbit. For the Tropics launches, the second stage is used to circularize the orbit, and instead, the kick stage's Curie engine conducts what's called a plane change maneuver to position the Tropics CubeSats at an inclination of 30 degrees, the best spot for monitoring the formation of tropical storms. Here's more from Guidance, Navigation and Control Team Lead, George Buchanan.
I'm Dr. George Buchanan, Guidance, Navigation and Control Engineer Team Lead, but you can just call me George.
These people get me fired up.
The GNC team, Guidance, Navigation and Control, is in charge of making sure that Electron gets to the right orbit. So the inclination of an orbit is the tilt. So a 0 degree basically means that you're going all the way around the equator. 90 degree means that you're going up and over the North Pole and the South Pole. So with a normal Electron, we'll go to a transfer orbit with our stage 2. So that means that we're in around about the right orbit, but slightly too low. And then we use our kick stage just to boost us up before we deploy payloads. So for Tropics, we've got to do a couple of sneaky things. So firstly, we do a dogleg, which is basically where our trajectory actually bends around.
George is my fucking
so we head up north rather than heading out east, and then we sort of curve as we're flying. And then the second thing which we have to do is we use our kick stage to do an on-orbit inclination change, which basically tilts the orbit which we're in to be in the right one. So for Tropics, between liftoff and payload deployment, most of it will look very similar. However, what's a little bit different for Tropics is that we'll be at the right altitude already. So if you're watching, you look carefully at the video and also at the altitude overlay, you'll see that we're much higher than normal. So we go into a coast until we get close to the equator, and at that point our kick stage will light its Curie engine and do an inclination change. We'll actually be pointing sideways and burning sideways. So we'll be traveling up along this way and actually thrusting at right angles to that, which is highly unusual, but it's what you need to do this change. Shortly after that, we'll do a payload deployment. And so we'll actually be deploying outside of ground station range. And so we won't have live confirmation of that until we get over our ground stations in Europe. Yes, so we've done this maneuver before. In fact, we did it for the first Tropics mission just a couple of weeks ago. And we expect it to do exactly the same thing. We'll head up north, do a dogleg, inclination change, and deploy some more satellites into orbit.
Yeah, so this thing's pretty cool, man. Like the fact that we're actually getting NASA contracts, it's the 37th launch. And one of the things I didn't mention is that in the 1Q earnings call, they talked about HASTE and how they're going to be able to not necessarily go, out of orbit, right, or low Earth orbit. They were going to go suborbital, meaning they're actually going to try to launch the vehicle at an angle or to a trajectory of being basically right below basically getting into outer space. And that's going to be able to kind of help get some of these different payloads that, some of the other folks like Virgin Orbit and a few others I anticipate we're supposed to kind of take from the US government. And unfortunately, with bankruptcies happening, and I think that this is going to be a continued space where we continue to hear more and more about these backlogs consolidating with, Rocket Lab having such a decent runway for capital, right? Where you have Relativity, you have Astra, both at very, very difficult points in their careers or their runways of capital going forward. I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that backlog getting consolidated over to Rocket Lab. And I even just did a quick video of Velo 3D. And while it might be a great product, I know SpaceX uses it, and a few others have kind of poked me and asked me specifically, like, Matt, what do you think of Velo 3D? And just looking, I mean, like, I don't have any bias towards it, right? I just looked at the cash flow statements and what I kind of saw. And they got about 60 or 70 million dollars, and here they are running 20 million dollars or more, a quarter. And unless they kind of come up with, like, the only reason why they only burned $10 million or was it $15 million from Q4 to Q1 is the fact that they issued $15 million worth of shares, right? So that's unsustainable in the long term, right? So unless you have some sort of cash influx or you truly get to a point where you're cash flow positive, then you're going to continue to burn. And that's part of the problem with Rocket Lab as well. But for now, they're well capitalized, right? They have $450 million, unlike some of these other companies that have less than 100 million. And so a lot of the companies, I think in 3Q, 4Q this year, you're going to continue to hear more and more about backlogs consolidating and companies in the space aspect of things going bankrupt. And I think 2024 is going to be a very pivotal year for a lot of companies and a footing year for a lot of companies. I think 2025 is where you truly, no pun intended, see liftoff for a lot of these things.
To all operators, this is LD on mission code. From now on, there should be no red flags on your critical LCCs. Vcon LD on mission code.
LD Vcon.
Vcon, please lock the auto sequence and confirm.
Confirmed.
Thank you. And Vcon, please confirm that all expected primary flight computer ASCOs are green.
Confirmed.
Thank you. To everyone on mission code, we are go for auto sequence start at T-minus 2 minutes.
Let's go.
LDs go for launch.
Yeah, so I guess in about 30 seconds, we're going to actually start the countdown towards actually looking at the final systems. You can see some of the gases coming off of the liquid fuel that they have within the rocket itself. And this is New Zealand, guys. You have to think, like, this is an American kind of based company that's launching American-based products out of New Zealand, which is a company first, right? Or just like an international sort of first. It's pretty cool. They have 2 launch pads. They have the one in New Zealand that you're seeing today.
Vehicle is on internal power. AFTS is green and ready for launch.
They have another one that's not too far from here. And then they also have launch pads in Walbs, Virginia. And I think they'll end up having 2 launch pads there. They're going to have an Electron and also a Neutron, which I think they're getting ready for the Neutron one by middle of next year. But I don't know where they're at in terms of finalizing that. You can see on the left part of the screen what
LOX load is complete. System is in recirculation.
What we're going to be going through after liftoff. All the different sequences that they're going to be calling out on microphone. But this is awesome, right? Like 37th launch, right? Like unprecedented comparatively
Guys
to the
ring
rest
is
of
disabled.
the small launch sort of market. You know, initially about the assets that they acquired, it got me a little scared, right? Because it burned through a lot of cash. But I think I was like, it's a launch company, right? Like
Stage
launch,
one,
launch,
stage
launch.
two, press for flight.
And what I've come to
Hyper flow,
realize
engine purge enabled.
is that it's a really good transition for the company. The transition went from, hey, we want to be the leader in small launch to everything that goes into space. We want to have a Rocket Lab logo on it. And that just gets me fired.
Deluge activated.
20 seconds to launch.
And T-minus 19 seconds and counting. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Fucking beautiful, man. Look at that shit. It just gets me so fired up, man. Look at that peninsula, dude. That launch site is absolutely gorgeous out of New Zealand. Look at that place, dude. Trying to get involved.
HVB discharge nominal.
And that is a beautiful liftoff for Electron. The final 2 Tropic satellites are on their way and coming to a storm near you. With Electron now having cleared the pad, the next milestone is max Q. This is the point where the forces on Electron are at their greatest. So we'll listen out for clearance of that key moment from Mission Control soon.
Max Q.
But yeah, feel free. Like, I'm here to answer any of you guys' questions. And, you know, if you
Clear
guys
max Q.
have any thoughts about
Stage one, propulsion is nominal.
the company or
And there
anything
we
to,
have
like,
it. Electron has passed through max Q and continues on the way to space. Right now, Electron is traveling at over 2,000 kilometers per hour and is at an altitude of 20 kilometers.
Now, coming up next is main engine cutoff, or MECO, where the 9 Rutherford engines on Electron's first stage shut down to make way for separation between the first and second stages. Within seconds, the single space-optimized Rutherford engine on the second stage will ignite to carry the kick stage and the Tropic satellites all the way to orbit. That should take place shortly at around T plus 2.5 minutes. So let's listen in to that call from Mission Control.
Stage one, propulsion still nominal. Please stand by for MECO in roughly 30 seconds.
so in about 30 seconds, they're going to do main engine cutoff. So you'll see this big orange light just kind of disappear. And then I think they'll kick off basically the second stage, which will be the
15 seconds to
the
MECO.
big cone that you end up seeing on the screen.
Station.
Entered burnout detect mode.
And MECO confirm.
Let's go.
Stage separation successful.
You see it separate and ignite. Let's go.
Stage two ignition.
So badass, dude. And this company's done this shit 37 times at this point.
And
this
just
is the
like
37th
clockwork,
time.
we have had MECO, stage 1 and stage 2 separation, and ignition of Electron's second stage. Coming up very shortly, we'll also see Electron's fairing separate and fall away. These 2 carbon composite halves form a protective nose cone over the Tropic satellites, keeping them safe during ascent. Once we're in space, though, they're not needed as the forces on Electron are not nearly as great. So we can get rid of them and clear the way for payload separation.
Yeah, dude, it's just astonishing. This company is unprecedented comparatively to any of the
Now,
other
for
ones that
this
are on the
mission,
market.
because we're headed to that 550-kilometer circular orbit straight away with stage 2, we're leaving the fairing attached just a little bit longer than usual. That jettison event should be coming up in the next 20 seconds or so.
Yeah, let's see if we can answer some of these questions. Have you read When the Heavens Went on Sale? I haven't. Is that a book? I have another book that I need to read as well, but I feel like I've heard that before. You got it on Audible.
Fairing separation successful.
Stage
And that's
propulsion,
fairing
hold it
separation
right
confirmed. We are at 4 minutes into flight now, and coming up next is a process unique to Electron, battery hot swap.
The pumps on Electron's Rutherford engines are powered by electron pumps, which draw their energy from batteries. Once we deplete the batteries, they are dead weight that we don't want to carry all the way to orbit. So we eject
Batteries
the
are these
batteries and
silver
swap
things
over
here.
to a fresh set in flight. That milestone is coming up just before 7 minutes into the flight, so still a ways to go yet.
Yeah, these silver things here, the batteries. But with respect to the assets that they bought, Cole can probably correct me if I'm wrong. Cole's my quant, as you would say. He's my guy. He's the one that really kind of like there was like 2 or 3 other space companies I kind of got into. So this one was like Vector, and then there was SPCE, which was IPOA at the time when I got into it, and it turned into SPCE.
So far for today's mission, we've had a perfect liftoff. We've cleared max Q.
And there was one other, I think it was Momentous, which ended up being a complete dud. I've since consolidated all that over time into Rocket Lab and continued to invest more and more into Rocket Lab because that one was the one that ended up being the least speculative and also coupled with, I think, the one that has the best trajectory going forward. And so with that, that's where it is. But, I think that this is a company that I think is going to trade at a depressed price for a pretty long time. And so I think that if anybody is curious or, would rather wait till some of the risk is either realized or mitigated from a financial perspective or getting the company towards where their gross margins get a little better, their net margins end up getting a little bit better. I understand that, right? Like, I think that you could wait a couple quarters. I don't think this is going to go to the moon tomorrow. And I feel like I would say if you wait, probably I would say 2 quarters. So like by 4Q this year, I think you're going to realize a lot of where the company's trajectory is headed, right? I think this is a pivotal year with a lot of the launches going on this year. They're going to be in like 15 launches this year, coupled with a new launch of Haste and stuff like that, which is going to be another revenue stream going into 24. You're going to find out a little bit more about the CapEx associated with, or the operating burn that you're going to see associated with Neutron after this investment that they had from the Long Beach Virgin Orbit sort of acquisition. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting kind of going forward, but I don't think you're going to be out of the woods until the second half of 2024, until you really understand that final trajectory. Hold on, let's just watch the jettison piece here.
Swap successful.
So you can see that big
And there you
silver
have it,
thing
a
going
clean
on.
hot swap for the second
Battery
stage
jettison,
Rutherford engine.
correct.
Electron continues to orbit with around 2 minutes remaining in today's stage 2 burn.
Speed is good, altitude is good, Electron is good. T plus 7 minutes into the second Tropics mission for NASA. Just in time for the Atlantic hurricane season commencing at the start of June. These 2 CubeSats, along with the 2 that we launched just 18.
So maybe it doesn't matter as much for you guys, but down here in the South, it might, with things like Katrina, Ike, Hurricane Harvey, which happened a couple years ago. The beginning of hurricane season is a big deal down here because, yes, you can have Sandys and stuff like that end up being in the East Coast, but it hits us pretty hard once a year at least. You can see up in the upper right-hand corner going about 15,000 kilometers an hour, almost going up to 16,000 kilometers an hour. This is badass shit, man. Literally rocket science. But going back to kind of what I was saying is by the end of Q4 2024-ish timeframe, you have an idea as to how much additional runway is going to be being spent on getting Neutron / I think their goal at the moment is still a Q4 2024 launch for Neutron. And that's their medium launch vehicle. So bigger than this one, more payload capacity, more launch revenue per launch. And just overall, I think it's going to be something that puts the company going forward. But also, I think one of the things that you'll realize through the next 2 quarters, which will feed into 2024 as well, is the reusability, right? So you're hearing a lot about the 3D printed engines on some of these things. they're actually going to start testing some of the engines if they were recovered, I think in the June or July timeframe. So that ability to potentially use these engines up to 10 times after they've been recovered. Now, it's not going to launch or land on its own like you have for like the Falcon 9 or something of the like, and maybe that's a capability they'll build on, to the Electron in the future. They haven't talked about that specifically, but the future potential, now that we're kind of going into this path of a medium launch vehicle, a suborbital vehicle, and the additional revenues associated with that. You have great solar systems that this company has, 33% efficient solar systems that are going to continue to be on plenty of satellites. You have to think, like, instead of carrying batteries or liquid nitrogen or liquid hydrogen or anything like that, to be able to continue. Hold on, let's listen to this part.
Transfer orbit achieved.
And that is SECO confirmed as planned. The kick stage has also cleanly separated, ready for that final Curie burn in around 20 minutes from now, followed by payload deployment at T+33 minutes. Because this final burn and deployment of the Tropics CubeSats happens in a ground station blackout zone, we won't get live confirmation of those milestones.
Yeah, so we're not going to get, it's 20 minutes from now. They're basically going to re-kick the burn, launch the satellites, everything like that. I'm not going to be on for that. But I'm more than happy to sit and talk to you guys about what's going on. I think this is going to be what they show you as kind of an animation, kind of going forward for what it's actually going to look like. But basically what I was getting to is the reusability aspect of things. They have forecasted that you could use these Rutherford engines 10 times. Would you be able to reuse the actual after recovery of the vessel? It's not going to be able to land on its own, but you could be able to launch it or like land it into, like, you had that first stage that's going to land into the ocean. If they recover that, will they be able to reuse that after some time? That'll be able to help cut down on costs and material in the future. So all these things are steps that are going to help with their margins going forward. They're going to be realized in the second half of 2023 and early 2024. And so that's just where we're at, right? I mean, we're still at an OPEX burn, a total cash burn of about $20 million a quarter. We have $450 million of cash remaining, 40% of which is going to Neutron, the other 60% of which is going to just cash burn to the company. So I think it's going to be interesting. But with respect to the assets that they purchased, I'm really curious what they're going to say, or if they're going to say more on it. It's literally hot off the press since yesterday, or maybe it was on Tuesday. Cole, if you could remind me of the $16 million equipment that they kind of bought from the Long Beach Virgin Orbit facility. But the hope is that helps a little bit with the Neutron launches going forward. So yeah, dude, New Zealand. I want to go to, you can see the view of New Zealand launch from New Zealand here. It's badass. Everybody stole those assets, man. Like, you think about it, at the time, I think the company was worth $1 to $2 billion, Virgin Orbit, and here we are, literally getting it for, $16 million. I mean, when you go to bankruptcy court, everyone's just trying to get their money back, right? So you're buying more for the accent, dude. Yeah, Peter Beck is a badass. Definitely a badass. That's unique. Battery jettison. I don't know if that's unique or not. It's tough. For those of you guys that don't know, it's a Big Short reference. You got second in a national math competition in China. No politicians. I agree, my man. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for the continued support. This one, dude, I know you're going to ask in a future lunch that we have or something like that. This one's speculative, man. I'd give it 12 months. Check in 12 months. You might lose out on some of the upside. Maybe it'll go back to the $8 range or so like that. But, losing out on a double, right, will still have 25x potential from that point going forward, in my opinion. So to me, even if you wait till $8, you realize some of that risk, or that risk kind of gets pushed off to the side, or, some of the uncertainties are realized in the stock, I think you'll be better off waiting. But I think, to me, it's worth, I don't know how much I got, like 15 grand or something in it. It's not a lot, but I don't mind losing the 15 grand. So, does it have a history of dilution? I'd have to check. I mean, they definitely pay employees and stock and stuff like that. That's a good point, though. I generally don't worry about those things. I think that kind of comes out in the wash. But I'll check because I think in 2021 is when they fully actually de-SPACed, and obviously the price has gone from $10 down to $3.90, and now it's back up to $4.55. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see, but I'll have to check about share dilution. 4%. 4% is not bad. Cole, thank you. I told you guys he's my quant. He's my quant. And if Cole's ever willing, like I'll have Cole on, like if he wants, but I also don't want to obligate him, right? So 0.5% a quarter. So that's not bad, right? You have to think. I think at this point the company's worth less than $2 billion or a little bit more than $2 billion. One personal rocket ship better than Lambo. Hey man, you're not wrong there. You're not wrong there. That requires a lot of payload though. I'm a big guy. Ooh, they got some like there you go. Neutron ops. They will be hiring pretty big for Neutron. And they've already kind of hired up for a lot of people in Virginia. So I'm kind of curious what happens more with that. Oh, you in New Zealand, my guy? Thanks for mentioning it. Absolutely. I'd like to get lost in the sheep. John Sarge, what's going on, man? Midwest knows, man. Midwest knows. Mark, thanks for stopping by, brother. Yeah, so you have the New Zealand government. Obviously, you have Australia investing in them now. So it's getting to the point where you're getting so many different contracts that are consolidating in on Rocket Lab that just the additional funding. Actually, they mentioned in Q1 they actually got from Space Force a contingency payment milestone award for basically where they've gotten to in the Neutron development, right? So that means Space Force wants to use the Neutron kind of going forward. So these companies and these government agencies have a vested interest in the success of Rocket Lab, which I don't think you could say for all the remaining. Like Astra, you have a little bit. What's the resistivity? You have a little bit. But I think the thing that is going to be best about Rocket Lab is you have vested interest from like Black Sky and a bunch of others that have done relatively well, and I think will continue to do well. Those of you that are Palantir investors, you guys know about Black Sky as well. Good average. First bought at 9, then around 4.8. I mean, that's up for you, man. I would say if anybody isn't invested yet and they're still a little bit risk shy, right? At this point, I'll just be blunt. If you invest in the company, it could still very well go to zero, right? I think it's way better off than an Astra, a Resistivity. A lot of the other small launch companies or just space companies on the market right now. Velo 3D being one of them. I just did a quick analysis on that. I think their cash burn and their cash runway is a lot less than what we're seeing at Rocket Lab right now. But, over the next 2 to 4 quarters, I would do another look. Keep it on your watch list, Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You might need to. And the thing is like right now, with all the other competitors, I feel like you wouldn't be able to successfully do a funding round. But if you consolidate the space, and where Peter Beck thinks he gets to is they basically have the cash runway at the moment to outlast their nearest competitors. And the small launch space is going to shrink. And not everybody needs to use a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket to get to orbit, right? So if you have these smaller launch vehicles that are necessary, then that's what you're going to be using to kind of do it. And you can only do it for like $6 to $9 million. Like if that's the entry to space, like that's pretty badass to get a satellite into space. Like NASA probably paid $6 to $9 to get this one into space versus using a Falcon 9. You're probably looking at 40 plus, right? So And I think Neutron will probably be in the middle, 20 to 30 million, kind of going forward. So that's the market, right? We're not going after. And then you have to think, like, once Starship really takes off, how much interest does Falcon 9 really have, right? And once Starlink kind of gets spun off and Starlink constellation is kind of done, like, the true mission is to go to Mars for SpaceX, right? That's why it's private. It's probably why it hasn't gone public. Like, because if it went public, they would tell Elon what he needed to do. And this is just my speculation, right? I mean, the company's job is to lose money to go to Mars. Like, no sane company would do that. Now, of course, he's getting NASA contracts. He's doing stuff on the side, but that's to get income to be able to do his true goal, which is get to Mars, right? And that's a losing endeavor for 10 to 15 years, right? Until 2040, that's going to be a losing endeavor until you truly get there and you truly start to understand and move things back and forth, right? But hey, you know, I appreciate the shout out here, but I know very little. I get a lot of my quant from Cole. So Cole, the guy that's in the chat, I mean, he's a man, and Everyday Astronaut's the man too. I watched some of his stuff. Can you please explain its TAM? You're new. Did I do a video on it? I know in their investor presentation, I have a few videos in the slide, not slide deck, in the, I guess, Rolodex of the Matt Money channel, where you can kind of look at, and I think it was it the last video that I did on Rocket Lab? Not the live, but I did probably one or 2 months ago where I did take a quick look at the TAM. But it depends, right? Because there's two big TAMs that you're looking at. You're looking at launch. You're also looking at space systems. And it grows pretty quick to the point where I anticipate revenue for this company getting to the $1 billion mark probably in the 2030 timeframe, if I remember correctly. And at that point, I think they're going to be doing 150 launches per year, one per week per launch pad. And so they have the 2 launch pads that you see in New Zealand here. They have the 1 launch pad that they have in Virginia. And I didn't have an idea as to how to model Neutron at that point. And so I anticipate a decent amount of that margin is going to be coming from space systems. A decent margin is going to be coming from just the launch vehicles themselves. Most of the dilution is over when it went from 75 2020 to 466 by 2022. Previous quarters only saw 2 million. Not a lot of share-based compensation as of yet. Yeah, that 2020 to 2022 was the D-SPAC, right? So that's where they basically got the $900 million in exchange for the dilution of the organization and buying into the company as a whole. Palantir, that's what it was, man. This was Palantir taking off. SG, what's going on, my guy? I've been in training all week at work, so next week when I get back into the main office, we'll have to get lunch, my guy. Palantir should have invested in Rocket Lab when they were doing their SPACs. Would have been interested in this combination of Black Sky. You know, I don't know. You know, they could be using Palantir Technologies as their operating systems. That's not far-fetched. I've heard in the past that SpaceX has used it for either one launch or has continued to use it, meaning the Palantir operating systems. So when Rocket Lab Lambo? I don't know, guy. I think you sold all your Rocket Lab, so I think you're out of that game for a little bit. You went more the real estate route, which, hey man, you get to touch it, right? I mean, it's all about risk versus reward and what makes you sleep well at night. So the real estate piece, I hear you with that. I think about that more and more every day. I'm trying to take the secondary rocket market, so having their NASA, they outsource to these guys. That's kind of what happened, man. Like, to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to flop this, right? I'm no expert. But basically in 2013, Obama shut down NASA, right? No more launches by NASA. Anything that went kind of forward was to happen through privatized industry. And so you have these collaborations through Boeing and Lockheed which they've launched like the Delta IV rockets that have done relatively well, but they're kind of getting to the end there now. You have SpaceX that has kind of done their plethora of rockets, and that's why you've seen over the past 3-4 years these other secondary launch or small launch sort of vehicles kind of come to fruition, because you have this market of NASA wanting to kickstart things back and go back to the moon, go back to Mars, which I think in reality was really kick-started again by Elon's success and making things cheaper, right? So Elon being able to make things more privatized and not owned and controlled by the government shrunk the amount of capital it actually took to get back to space. And that obviously has kind of jump-started the industry again, just kind of like what was going on with electric vehicles. Everyone's kind of kick-started, realized electric vehicles are something that is actually going to be coming to fruition, and it kick-started everybody else, GM, Ford, Rivian, all those guys. So, yeah, Black Sky. Yeah, it's true. Which is pretty funny. Everyone's just like, Black Sky, it's going to zero. It's like, Black Sky's actually doing okay. Rocket Lab to Mars, Venus, that's true. For those of you guys who don't know what they're referring to, they actually have some contracts to send some of their Photon space vehicles to Mars, to Venus, back to the moon. They've actually sent some things to the moon. So this company's the real deal, right? You talk about interplanetary. So at the moment, and listen to me when I say that, at the moment, there's no plan for any sort of personal space vehicles, right, where you're sending people into space. But they kind of alluded to in one of their previous investor presentations or one of their earnings calls that it's not out of the realm. It's just not something they're doing right now. So it's pretty cool. You wouldn't call it a secondary market. Yeah, launch capabilities based on customer size of their hardware. Sometimes you need larger vehicles, sometimes you don't. Exactly. I mean, sometimes, this could be a dedicated launch vehicle. Somebody could say, hey, we'll spend the $6 million to use your rocket, right? And some people might say, we don't need to rent 10,000 kilograms of your vehicle, right? We just need a couple hundred kilograms. And that's where Rocket Lab can come in. And another thing is the photons are kind of really getting finished up. And that's like the satellites that can kind of be used from Rocket Lab, right? That put everything into space has a Rocket Lab logo on it. That's where they're kind of coming from. The solar panels that are being used, some of the tracking devices that are being used, and a bunch of other things that I'm probably not familiar with, but also the Photon, which is kind of like their spacecraft, right? That you can actually send to go test things and, send back information and stuff like that. That's also going to be something that comes from Rocket Lab. So then you can kind of create them from an end to end. And then they also have the software piece where you can use their software, as a service to be able to understand what's going on. And that part I'm not as familiar with, right? That I may need to do a bit more research with. But the Investor Day presentation, it's like 100 slides. It goes through a lot of the acquisitions that happened in late 2021. And the thing that kind of bothered me, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, was, and that'll probably end after a few more conversation pieces here. They basically got their money late 20, early 2021, the $900 million, and then they went and spent a couple $100 million on buying some of these things. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, the thought is to get Neutron into space. The thought is to get small launch. The thought is all these different, launch. And you start realizing it's like, well, why are they doing these launches, right? They're doing these launches to get other vehicles into space or, learn more about space or exploration. And so to have that solar company that's 33% efficient, right? Like that could not necessarily just have space implications, but 33% efficiency with the thinness that it has, has the ability to impact even the commercial markets on Earth, right? So it's pretty interesting in that respect. Keys, that's right. I forgot. Oh, little sea stakes. Don't threaten me with a good time, SG. Don't threaten me. Computers and their hardware. Overall, the technology shrunk in size, but precision insertion have greatly increased. That's where companies like SpaceX, Rocket Lab, and ULA come in. Yeah, ULA is the Lockheed Boeing combo, right? That's run by Tony Bruno. And dude, one night I was just in the zone. I watched that like 45-minute video with Smarter Everyday guy, and he had the opportunity to kind of tour their rocket lab. No pun intended, but like their rocket factory. And dude, like my mind was just blown. But yeah, with that, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned a little bit. For those of you guys that aren't familiar with Rocket Lab, it's something that I'm truly looking at as a speculative position within my portfolio, coupled with Palantir. Those are really the two big ones. You have the TQQQs, you have the SOXL minor bits as well, and then you have the what else do I got? Baba and stuff like that in there. But everything else is pretty traditional, nothing too crazy. And so with that, I think it's a good opportunity to look at if you're into the risk, but always do your own due diligence, always consult a financial advisor. But I think that this one, has a lot of opportunity going forward. And you've worked with ULA on Artemis and you're not impressed. Okay, interesting. Well, I think that NASA's doing a lot of contracts with Rocket Lab now, so we'll see how that kind of goes going forward. I'm trying to remember what one we did before this, the Tropics ones. I don't know why the name's blinding me. It's like 11:30, so and I've been thinking pretty hard this week, so it's probably why it's skipping me, but it's on their website. It took me 5 minutes to look up, if that, 5 seconds rather. But I think that this is a good opportunity for people if they can endure the risk. If they can't, look out for the next 6 to 12 months. I think a lot of these problems financially are going to be kind of realized, and it could be another point where you're still probably at the same strike price if you're looking for options, or just stock price in general if you're looking for a long-term investment in that. And I think really the fun part will be the second half of 2024, which I think, again, you'll have a better runway and vision for if you wait 6 to 12 months from now before initiating any sort of position. Disclosure, I have a position. Disclosure, again, I'm not a financial advisor or anything like that, so do your own due diligence in that respect. But hopefully this was fun for you guys. If you guys liked it, let me know. And I'll talk to you soon. And maybe we'll just wait a second and hear about the Curry burn. But after that, we'll sign off. But I might just sit here and listen to this very soothing music. And see you guys next time for the 38th launch, which I don't think they've scheduled yet, but I know they have one planned for June, and I'm pretty sure they have one for July as well. So like I said, I'll just let the music go out in the background, and we'll kind of just wait to hear if there's any additional things kind of coming through over the next minute or two. And if not, we'll shut it down. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.